Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Catherine Brooks from Speedheater with us. And Catherine, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into this field? Tell me about yourself.
Okay, I started out in the healthcare field decades ago, to reveal my age here, and over time got involved in recycling and environmental issues, and eventually into retail, and then that all sort of came together in the early 2000s, and I came across the infrared paint strippers from Speedheater and decided to open my company, EcoStrip. And that's what I did, 2003. So it was a combination of public health and environmentalism that really got me interested in the product. Also, I had a really old house. My husband and I had a really old house, and we decided to strip it, and I used a power washer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a huge disaster. Looked like a giant earth farm on the side of our house. Just these horrible marks, and eventually we've ended up fixing that, but I learned that lesson very early on, the downside of power washing.
Yes, yeah. If you're not careful with any of those aggressive things, and you don't know exactly, how much pressure to give, it could be pretty detrimental to the house. And you were saying from a public health standpoint, is that because of the lead paint?
Yeah.
That you were interested in the infrared strippers?
Yeah, the infrared heat is a really good way to deal with lead paint, and I might as well go into that now. It is heat, but it reacts very differently. Infrared heat goes through the paint and into the wood and moves the molecules in the wood, and that friction creates heat, which goes back up into the paint. So it ends up separating the bottom layer of paint from the wood. And as a result, behind the wood doesn't get heated, so that's a lower fire risk. And it only takes about 400 to 600 degrees with infrared for this process to work. So the paint does not get hot enough to release the lead fumes, which with heat guns, it happens at about 1,000 degrees when the heat is blowing on the paint.
Right.
So very safe with lead paint. Still have to worry about the lead paint dust, but
right.
That's for any method.
But you're not at least heating it enough that the fumes become airborne.
That's right.
Yeah. So you started your business, did you say, in 2004?
2003.
Oh, 2003. Okay. And did you just discover this product and decided that was a direction you wanted to go? Was it a focus on preservation, or I guess you said the environmental concerns too?
Well, actually, the husband of a friend of ours, my husband and my friend, found the tool in Sweden and imported it into the U.S. and happened to be visiting, and I was in between jobs and said, hey, do you want to distribute this down here in the mid-Atlantic? And I looked at it and watched it, how it worked, and said, wow, that is really cool. And so I started doing the distribution down here, and over the years ended up becoming the U.S. distributor for the whole country and Canada, which was
very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Are you let's see. Are most of your most of the people that purchase the product, are they mostly homeowner or not homeowners, but like older home, like either professionals or homeowners?
It's a split. The first adopters of the tool were professional preservation restoration people. And that's because they've been working with lead paint for so long. They know
Right.
the dangers. And they also have a particular interest in being careful with the wood. And that's kind of something that may not be top on the heads of homeowners, DIYers.
Right.
The restoration people picked up on it really fast, especially folks that do windows, because it's particularly good on windows. Over the years, I've discovered that DIY homeowners that have bought older homes are getting pretty savvy, and they're very internet research oriented, and they start to tootle around on the internet and discover the dangers of lead, and then they run into us.
Right.
Looking at how do they deal with the lead. So we're getting more and more homeowners, but that's a pretty hard education curve, to be honest with you.
Right, right. I could see that. And that's why we do so much education, is because it takes a lot of education to kind of help somebody understand the reason why you should, approach it certain ways. So I understand that. So tell me about your products. I know you have a couple different products. And you have a couple different speed heater products, but then you also have like tools and things too, correct?
Yeah. We started out with a tool which we call the Speed Heater Standard 1100, and it heats an area about 3 by 10 inches and takes anywhere from 20 to 60 seconds. Interestingly enough, the thicker the paint is, the easier it separates, which is sort of counterintuitive for any other method.
Right.
Like chemicals, sometimes it takes a couple of applications. Sanding is very tedious, but it's really gratifying to take some big, goopy old paint and heat it with infrared and see it separated so quickly. So the manufacturer, who is in Sweden, also is the inventor, and developed a whole line of scrapers. And they're different than most paint scrapers in that they're pole scrapers. So you could have, of course, used putty scrapers, but the advantage of these pole scrapers is, number one, they have beveled edges, so they're really sharp. And secondly, they have long handles, which means they're intended for you to put 2 hands on them so that you get a much wider and even and slightly deeper stroke once you cut through the soft paint. So there's one for straight edges, that's called the clapboard. There's one for wide curves, about 1 inch wide, that's called the profile. And then the third one we have is called the boomerang, which actually is shaped like a boomerang. And that one is great for getting in narrow grooves. And then recently we released one called the 8 cut. It actually has 8 very sharp edges that you can rotate around the head and use all of those edges. So those are the key scrapers, paint scrapers.
Okay.
Then they also developed a set of tools specifically for window restoration. And window restoration is a big challenge. A lot of professionals do window restoration, but more and more homeowners are tackling it themselves.
Right.
And the kit has the boomerang scraper, which is really good for tight spaces. It also has what we call a chisel with a roller, which is really cool because some people have been hacking away at rock hard glazing putty.
Yes. Yeah. Depending on the type, it's really hard.
And they break glass.
Yeah.
So one of the other cool things about infrared is it can soften the glazing. And then the chisel with the roller, you can set the distance between the wood surface and the glass and roll the wheel right along the wood to really nicely remove that softened glazing. And so the risk of breaking glass is really low. And then there's a third one, which is we call the putty scraper, which is how you get the bulk of the glazing out, or you clean out the bed underneath the glass. So there's some specialized tools for windows, but the other scrapers are good for about anything that you're working on.
Okay, very good. And you have a new one. I know it's on my husband Jonathan's wish list. The Cobra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over the years, customers have requested something smaller because the original Speedheater 1100 is a very large machine. It's about the size of a shoebox, and it weighs over 4 pounds. So the manufacturer developed one that we call the Cobra, and it heats an area about 3 by 3 inches, and it heats it in less than 5 seconds. It is a monster.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are using it again for windows, but for interior work or any place where you have a tight space, the Cobra is particularly good because that head gets into tight spaces. And we found that people doing interior work are really paying close attention. They've got the heater right up close to their heads, and they're looking to see what's going on. And the Cobra is very good for that because they're paying very close attention. We kind of discourage people from doing that on siding because we think that people are a little more lax about doing their siding. They're paying less close attention. And the Cobra is so fast that literally if you turn your head away, you could overheat the paint.
Yeah,
so,
I could see that. And with the siding, you have it would become more monotonous than like if you're stripping a baluster or a piece of decorative trim.
right.
Yeah.
So you sort of lose your attention, and then you risk overheating.
So, do you what was I thinking about this? I know for this siding, do you still have the armrest so that if you wanted to just keep moving it, you can?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
it's called the classic arm, and what it does, it comes with a base, and you provide a pipe. We don't ship pipes because they could be 10, 20 feet high. So you provide a pipe that sticks in the base, and then we provide some brackets that help you stabilize the pipe against the side of your house. And then this articulating arm weighs about 12 pounds, and it can stretch out to 5 feet on either side of the pole with your speed heater on it. And as a result, you can turn the speed heater facing the siding. You can turn it upside down facing a soffit. You can pretty much put it at any angle you want. And while the speed heater itself is heating one surface, paint bubbles, and then you move the speed heater ahead while you scrape the first one.
Yes.
So it really doubles your productivity, and people working on siding have a lot of surface to work with.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of square feet there. So, what do you wish that you knew when you got started that you know now? Is there any tips or tricks or public confessions?
Probably the biggest one is how little people know about the dangers of lead paint. It's been almost terrifying to me to drive around in these old towns and see people dry scraping this lead paint.
Oh, yeah.
Flying all over the place. People are walking on the sidewalk, and it's just very discouraging that there's so many people, including professionals, who just aren't paying attention. And that's why I sort of jumped on the bandwagon with lead paint education. Really early on, is that I see that as a really important part of what EcoStrip is. I talk about lead paint with anybody that I sense they are a younger person. I ask them if they have little kids, and then I get on my soapbox with them because I just think it's so important. And as I said, it's amazing how savvy younger people are these days.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I wonder, have you seen changes in the way people are treating it since the EPA regulations, or you really don't see a difference?
I do, in the sense that professionals pay more attention, especially the bigger firms, painting firms. The smaller ones are flying under the radar.
Right. Yeah.
That's always been the case. And then there's some professionals sort of in between who literally will not touch a house if you tell them it has lead paint. They say, I'm busy enough, I don't need to mess with that. but there are a lot of people out there that the EPA, they think doesn't apply to them. So
Right.
now the water in Flint, Michigan, the lead in the water has helped in the sense that there's more awareness about lead.
I hadn't even thought about that. I know there's 2 cases that have made the local paper in Lancaster that when we're doing presentations, I bring up, because both times they were parents that were at work, got lead paint all over them, didn't change their clothes when they got home, weren't wearing protective, coveralls or something over their clothes, didn't change their clothes when they got home, and actually ended up giving lead poisoning to their children.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I those are stories that I tell, because I know I was stripping paint, in my childhood years. I was probably middle school age, but that was one of my tasks. And I wasn't wearing a respirator and stuff, but at least I was, I wasn't a toddler.
Right.
And I try to really, I agree with you. I really try to emphasize for, young children and pregnant women, you need to be careful. And we really struggle with that too, with employees. I watched somebody a couple of years ago come down off the scaffolding. They had been up working on a cornice, and he started eating a sandwich. And I'm like, you need to wash your hands. Like, you wonder why your lead levels are high.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and it's not hard to do. And I don't feel like it's, cost prohibitive. It's just being careful, and it's less cleanup. So then it's less labor anyway, like on the back end.
Yeah. And that, again, that's another thing that infrared is very helpful with, because when you're stripping the paint, it's soft. So
Right.
It's generating less dust. It's kind of clumping and falling on your plastic sheeting. So it's a way for us to tell people there are safer ways to do it than just dry scraping and creating dust and chips.
So what trends or challenges are you seeing in preservation or in educating people about the dangers of lead paint and paint removal? What are you seeing?
I have been involved with a group for, I'd say, 8 years of professional window restorers. And 8 years ago, a lot of them honestly didn't take it very seriously. And right now, as a matter of fact, this week, they're having their every 2-year conference, and lead is right up there on the agenda. And that's
great.
Very heartening to me. And I know that it's becoming, in the preservation industry, it's getting more and more attention. I'm still not excited that remodelers are very resistant. I mean, that's been my biggest frustration, is to make the awareness of remodelers and painters. And you look at a lot of those HGTV and even This Old House shows on TV, and it's really scary how they don't pay attention. So it's getting better, Danielle, but we got a long ways to go.
Right. Well, and I think too, those shows are so unrealistic, but people who don't do it day in and day out don't realize how unrealistic they are.
Yeah.
And I think too that like the painters, I would think, would be a huge group to educate, but remodelers, especially like the people who are going in to do like replacement windows and things like that I think that would be that is a challenge, because they just want to go in and get done. Like, they don't want to spend time protecting the inhabitants of the house from the lead paint.
Well, and I discovered probably 10 years ago that there are a lot of government programs where they're working in lower income housing where lead paint poisoning is obviously a problem.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the government programs go in and rip out the old windows.
Right. Yeah.
Vinyl and aluminum windows. And they're not terribly careful about it. And they don't, like you said, they don't particularly want to do it right or cleanly. They just want to do what they're paid to do, which is to rip them out and put in cheap windows.
Right. Yeah. And get done in a day.
And throw all those good windows in the trash.
Right. Yeah. So how do you keep up with trends? How do you go to events? Are there certain things that you read?
I do a lot of reading. I keep up with the preservation trends pretty well. I go to conferences, training sessions. For example, there's one called the Preservation Trades Network, and there are a lot of folks that have been doing stonework and window restoration and ironwork, and I've been going to those conferences for my full 15 years.
Right.
Interesting thing about those is they're also beginning to get in the education arena. So I like that. I have gone to some conferences for remodelers, but I get pretty frustrated. I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall.
It's a different mindset.
Yeah, it really is. I read magazines for remodelers. I've been keeping up with those, and that helps me because at least I can speak about the trends. For example, there's one called Aging in Place.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. More interest because my age is called the silver tsunami, where there's millions of us coming up, and older people are staying in their homes. They just want to, fix their homes up, and they're a good audience too. The retired people are a good audience for preservation and restoration if you can get to them.
Right.
You can get to them and educate them. But that's an example where, reading the trends or looking at, parts of the country where the most restoration is going on. Or I don't much read painting magazines, again, because it's like banging my head against the wall.
Right.
So I kind of stick with what magazines and online newsletters are looking at restoration, preservation, taking old neighborhoods and gentrifying. Those are the ones where I spend more attention.
That makes sense to me. So how can our listeners contact you?
Well, you can either call us, our office, which is 703-476-6222, or you can write to our information line, which is info@ecostrip, and there's a hyphen between eco and strip, ecostrip.com. And we get a lot of requests from people that way. There's also a contact page on our website where we get really good questions from folks.
Okay.
And we've got some blogs. We try to do a lot of education on our blogs. People respond to those. So pretty much, call us, email us, respond on the website. Lots of good ways to get a hold of us.
Okay, and I'll make sure all of those are on our website when we post the
Perfect.
the episode. Do you have any offers for our listeners? Any place you'll be?
We do. To encourage people to try, certainly, our larger infrared paint removers, we are giving us $30 off on either the Cobra or the Speedheater kit. Speedheater kit is the larger model, and it comes with the two most common scrapers. So either one of those two, if people want to go to the website, and when you're checking out with those two items, if you enter the code KPS,
okay,
which is yours, I believe.
Thank you.
Services. They can apply that $30 discount.
Okay, very good. I'll make sure that's on with the episode too, so that people can go and look quickly and make sure they're getting it in right.
Excellent.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us? I feel like I learned some things from you, and I think your evolution into this makes sense from a public health environmental standpoint, and I think that your lessons are important.
Probably the biggest thing is that any of us in this field have a responsibility to do the education about lead. I mean, I feel sort of obsessed by it sometimes, but there's not enough education out there, and
right.
We've got to keep doing it. And I feel really good about our products because they help with that. They are safe to use. They don't create the lead fumes that nobody sees. And I have examples of, like you do, of people that have been poisoned and fallen off their ladders and done all kinds of horrible things. And it's real important for us. The other thing that I've developed over the years is I was not a preservation person, and I certainly wasn't a painter. And I still don't tell people that I'm a painter. So if
Right.
somebody asks me, I'll say, look, I don't know about paint. I know about how to get paint off.
Right.
So I can feel good about that, but not get beyond my knowledge. And that's the safest thing for me to do. Is
Right. Right. Well, and you know what it takes to prep it beforehand so that their paint does last and you do get a good paint job. And that's more important sometimes, I think, than some of the other things that you can do for painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I was you too, I would be very gratified. I love it when we like have really thick paint and then we take it off and we find like this detail in the molding that nobody's seen since they have put layers and layers of paint on.
Or they find this gorgeous wood under there. And
Yes, yeah.
no idea it had great wood. I mean, it's been painted for 5 times over the decades.
Yes, yeah.
The detail's gone. The wood, they have no idea what it is. And the first time they strip, it's like, oh my God, look at this.
It's so much excitement.
It is. And when it's thick, that's what really trips people out. It's like, oh my God, that was so easy. They've been putting on layer after layer of chemicals, and it's so goopy and messy, and they just get excited. It's very rewarding. We get some pretty hysterical emails from people that have used our tools, especially the Cobra that's so fast. And
oh yeah.
I said, oh my God, that was amazing.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.